Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So in today's video, I'm going to be installing a dual battery setup into my X-Shape project. The kit that I'm going to be using today, I purchased on Amazon. If you're interested in it, you can check out the link in the description down below. I'm just going to jump into it. So my first step in mounting my secondary battery is I need to make a tray for it. They do make some aftermarket trays that you can put in that place. You can also use a stock tray out of another Cherokee. I'm just going to go ahead and build one up real quick because I don't have any of those parts laying around. So what I'm going to do is just build a cheap battery tray, easy battery tray, out of some, it's actually old bed rail. It's a little rusted up, so I'll have to clean it up before I can weld on it. But this is basically what I'm going to use. In order to fit my second battery, I have to relocate my ECM. So let me show you guys what I got going here. So this is the battery that I have in here for temporary, and it pretty much clears everywhere. When I get the full-size battery in here, it'll barely clear this bolt, but that'll be okay. But your ECM, which normally mounts right here, is now, I think I'm going to build a bracket for it to mount right here. This is what I have built here for my battery tray. One of the challenges is where to relocate my ECM to, and that's where this comes into play. I'll show you more about that here in just a second. But this is what I've built here, just out of some angle iron. This is for mounting, and I also have another bolt that goes through for mounting. Where I was coming up short was how to actually strap my battery down, and what I decided and what I came up with was I just took a couple of pieces of all thread and some old drill bits that were no good anymore, bent them to shape, welded them on here, and it actually turned out pretty good. So I don't know how well you can see. My all thread will come in and hook in, and then I've got a strap that goes across the top. Works out pretty good. So for this section here, I've actually designed it to hold this relay box that I've built. I've got this on Amazon. I'll put a link down in the description below for this item here. And there's going to be a video on how I built this. If it already hasn't been posted, I'll be posting that in the future. So this is what we got going here. This is where my battery is actually going to sit. These brackets here come up, and this is where I've mounted my ECM. And over here, these brackets that come off are where this relay box is going to sit. It is going to be kind of a pain if I need to open it up and get it out, because it is sitting underneath here. But when I get it all wired up, I'm not going to worry about it too much. If I have to change anything, I'll just unbolt it and pull it up out of the way, and that'll be fine. Let's go ahead and stick our battery in here. I'm going to pull this up and out of the way, and we'll get our kit hooked up. This here is the kit I purchased on Amazon. It's pretty cheap. This here is everything that comes in the box. You've got all your wire here. It gives you some zip ties, the switch itself, and some battery connectors, some shrink tubing, and all your other connectors. This piece here, it's designed to start charging after it reaches a certain amount of volts, and then stop charging if it drops below a certain amount of volts. That way, if your system isn't producing enough to charge the second battery, it will prioritize the system instead of the secondary battery taking up all that charge as well. So I looked at the instructions again, and it talks about making sure to mount your isolator as close as possible to the battery, to the start battery. So what I'm going to do is mount it up here at the firewall. All this wiring here is going to be going away eventually, so it won't be in my way, but this is where I'm going to mount it. So the first thing we're going to do is take our backing plate, where we're going to mount our battery isolator, and we want to mark where it's going to go. So we want to mark our 4 holes here so we can drill them out. Alright, now that that's secured and mounted, we need to route our wires. So I'm going to take the supplied cable, plenty of extra cable. And we're going to start around abouts where it needs to be. And we can always shore up our extra wire later. But right now we're just going to do a rough fit. Start where we need to be. I'm going to run it along and run it to my positive side of my battery. And I'm going to leave a few inches extra, not only so that when I route it later and zip tie it all down, I can know for sure that it's plenty, but also if anything gets screwed up and we have to fix any cable ends, it's nice to have a little bit of extra wire. So now that that's done, we just want to repeat the process, running it along to the other side. All right, so what we need to do next is there's little knockouts for your wires to run through, so you need to figure out where your wires are going to be and get those all knocked out. So I know I have a ground here, and we're going to need to run a ground out. So I'm going to go ahead and knock out this one here and run both my feed battery and my ground through this spot here. Now, the plastic is really sharp once you knock those pieces out, so I suggest taking a knife or something and cleaning that up. That way you don't have any rub-through problems. Okay, so now after a little trial and error with how to mount my wires, it's all ready to be mounted up. So I'm going to go ahead and stick this on this back plate here, and we'll be all set. So the connector that came with the kit isn't big enough to mount how I want to mount it. Because I have a side post battery, I'm just going to mount it directly to that side post. So I needed to dig out a bigger terminal. And this one will work good. It'll slide right over, and we can either crimp it or solder it on depending on your preference. I'm really partial to solder, so I'm going to go ahead and do that, but it would probably been easier to do that before I got it mounted. But that's all right. I'm just going to go ahead and do it in the vehicle. Now, as with any soldered connection, you want to make sure it's on there pretty good. So don't be afraid to give it a nice solid tug, and it is on there. I'm going to let this cool off before I decide to do anything else on this side of the Jeep. Onto that side. So on this side over here, we're going to be doing the same thing, only we're going to be using the connectors that they gave us. So we got our battery terminal connector that's going to go on, and we're going to go ahead and solder one of the connectors on that they gave us so we can mount it right to the top of this battery. Now remember, when you're soldering, you're not just trying to lay solder on top of your wire. You're wanting the solder to actually flow through the wire and make a nice bond with the connector as well. So when you're doing it, you want to make sure you get your wire really, really hot. Something that would have probably helped me in this case is if I preheated the wire quite a bit and then stuck my connector on. But you're wanting to fill the entire connector with solder as well as let the solder flow through all of the wire. Now we're going to go ahead and let this one cool down while we finish up on the other side. Over here on this side, I'm actually going to be mounting it to the side terminal. So what I'm going to be doing is, instead of using a connector up here, I'm actually going to be attaching this to the side terminal of the battery. Also, we need to make sure that we ground it. So I've got a connector that I'm going to put on here, and we're just going to ground to this existing ground here. So now that we got our ground wire connected, the only other wire that comes off of this block here is your override wire. So this wire here will activate your solenoid when connected to ground. So you can run it to a switch and run the other end of that switch to ground. That way when you turn on the switch, it grounds out this wire and it overrides this switch here. That way, if you're sitting and the vehicle's off, you can flip that switch and it will allow your other battery to start your vehicle if your starter battery is dead. Something else it will do, if you need to do a lot of winching and your vehicle is off, you can flip that switch. It will draw power from both batteries instead of just whatever battery you have connected to it. Right now, we're not going to connect this wire to anything because I'm going to be wiring up a ton of switches all at the same time, and I want to run this switch through that system as well. So we're just going to tuck this aside for now, put a zip tie on it, make sure it doesn't connect to anything. Now that we're cooled off on this side, we can go ahead and finish routing where we want our wire to go, and it will attach to the top of our battery terminal here. So our next step is to find out where we're going to mount our ground cable. So there's a stud down here from where the original intake was mounted, and I think that would be a great location to mount our ground cable. It also gives us plenty of extra cable in case we need to move things around in the future as well. So it's right down here. I think it'll work out great. So our last step is to hook up our start battery and check for voltages. So in order to make sure that everything's connected properly, you want to check your voltage directly on the battery. 12.46. Now the next thing you want to do is check voltage with the battery, only connect your ground to somewhere else on the body or the engine to make sure that it's got a good solid ground. And once again, we're at 12.46, so we know that that is a good, solid connection. Next thing you want to do is the same thing, only you want to check your ground at your battery, at your start battery. And once again, we are at 12.46. So it's safe to say that we have a good, solid connection across everything. The next step is to start it up and make sure that our solenoid actuates properly. Now, because you're going to have a surface charge on your starting battery, it might take a minute for your solenoid to kick off. So if you're trying to test it, you might leave your headlights on for just a moment or something like that. That way it can draw that surface charge off the starting battery and it'll allow your solenoid to kick off. We are all hooked up and running. So the last thing that we are going to test is our bypass wire. Now I didn't wire this up yet. This is going to go to a switch inside the cab. I'm going to be creating a whole switch panel, so I'm not really sure where I want to mount it yet. But this will go to ground. So you want to put it on a switch that goes to ground. So we're going to check it right now by grounding it out and seeing if our LED light comes on. So the light comes on and you can feel the solenoid actuate. So we are all set, everything is working properly, and we are good to go. Last step is to take and zip tie all your wire, that way nothing's moving around. If you like this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up, and as always, don't forget to hit that subscribe button down there. Thanks for watching.
Ooh,